Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Of course, it would be lovely if we were all chatting on the sandy shores of Cannes, strolling down the Croisette, but instead I'm joining you from rainy Mull in Scotland. And I hope wherever you are, you have some cool chilled rosé on tap, even though it is only 10 a.m. Of course, if we were at Cannes, we would have had some carbon cost to that travel. So I thought I'd start by framing what we've saved by not travelling there. A return flight from London to Nice has a carbon footprint of 0.428 tonnes of carbon dioxide. And that's not actually loads. It would cost about £1.78 to offset that. Offsetting is really very affordable. And for those who would choose to take the train, the Eurostar, they would cut their emissions by 85%. So there are some very sustainable methods. Indeed, offsetting is very affordable, but the absolute best solution for the planet is to not go at all. So the first thing to do is all sit here very smugly, pat ourselves on the back and say, well done for doing nothing. But of course, this isn't a normal year and we hope to be back soon enough. So let's consider what that will mean for the planet. Now, the Cannes Lion Festival on their website, they say they have 15,000 delegates registered. And I've assumed that we'll add an additional 25% for unregistered and the workforce. And they say they come from 90 countries. Now, I've crudely divided that 90 countries into 3 geographical areas, going from London, from Chicago, and from Singapore. And I've divided it across those three destination points. And I've assumed that 99% of people are flying. So with those assumptions in mind, I've calculated that through travel alone, the Cannes Lion Festival will drive an additional 32,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. To offset that, we need to plant 1.6 million trees. It's calculated at roughly 50 trees per tonne. So 1.6 million trees, okay, that's not that intimidating. That's a modest forest. And luckily, our first speaker on the panel today is doing exactly that. So I'm going to hand over to Marcus to talk to us a little bit about the Million Tree Pledge and the work he's been doing.
Thank you, Amy. Do you mind if I share screen? I've got a couple of visual aids. Is that cool? Host disabled participant screening. I need a friendly host to let me drive. If that's okay. Or I can go a cappella.
One moment, please. Hold, please.
I now have permission, I believe. Wonderful. I'd like to begin by asking each of you a question. Are you being a good ancestor? See, I believe in the 2020s, this is such a vital question for each of us to be asking. And here's why. If we look at this infographic, according to the latest estimates, in the last 50,000 years, we've had 100 billion people who have lived and died. In the next 50,000 years, we're likely to have 6.75 trillion people. That's 877 descendants for each one of us here today, which means that decisions that each of us make in the next 10 to 15 years will hugely impact these unborn people. Our decisions will determine whether these future generations will have a habitable planet or even have the chance to exist. We have an unimaginable amount of responsibility here because our great-great-grandchildren will judge us not by how well we grew our businesses, but by how well we collectively did 2 things. Stop dumping CO2 in the atmosphere and draw down what we've put up there. So what can we actually do though? Well, in addition to racing to zero emissions, my agency, Fountain Partnership, and a few other agencies have set up the Million Tree Pledge site. And the pledge has 2 parts. Number 1, pledge to plant 1 million trees. And number 2, find at least 2 other pledges so the movement grows exponentially. We launched in April this year, and so far we've got 25 pledges who already planted 2.5 million trees. Our goal is to get thousands of pledges to plant tens of billions of trees in the coming years. And for my agency alone, planting 1 million trees will draw down enough CO2 to cover the size of 50 businesses who are similar size to Fountain. And this is an example of going way beyond. And I think that's the thing I really want to talk to you guys about today. On the BEMA Sustainability Council that I sit on with Amy, we have 5 steps for each of our members. The first 3, offset, measure and reduce, are where most agencies and people believe they need to be playing. But I'd argue that for advertising to really save the world, we as agencies and advertisers, of course, need to be playing with the first 3, but be focusing mainly on the next 2, going beyond. Where it's becoming a B Corp, taking the 1 million tree pledge, what can your business do today that goes way beyond its environmental impact? Because we know that lots of people won't be doing anything. And then number 5, influence. As creatives, this is where we need to be playing. We're the storytellers, the influencers, the persuaders. We can be good ancestors by getting our clients, our networks, and the people who engage with our content to take bold action on climate change. And I'm really looking forward to discussing this with the panel shortly, because quite frankly, there are many unborn people who are counting on each one of us right now. And as harrowing as this quote is, I believe if we come together and start taking action, we can begin to turn this around. Thank you for listening.
What a powerful start. I mean, yeah, 6.75 trillion people on our shoulders. We've got quite a lot of responsibility. Just before I move on to the next speaker, how does a person take the 1 million tree pledge? How can every one of us on the call get involved?
Great question. So go to milliontreepledge.org and you fill out the form, and then we'll tee up an interview, and just there's a few things just to check that you're able to take the pledge, that you have to plant at least 10,000 just to get the ball rolling. We want to obviously avoid greenwashers and people just wanting to do it for a SEO backlink or something ridiculous like that. But milliontreepledge.org, or reach out to me, Marcus Hemsley. I'm on LinkedIn. Just drop me a direct message, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you, Amy.
All right, so we're going to come back to you in a little bit. We've got a couple of more questions to ask, but first I'm going to pass the conch, is it called, to Helen. Helen is a strategy director and joint head of MediaCom's UK Social Change Hub, and Helen's going to be talking about the changing definition of success in business and what this means for agencies.
Thank you, Amy. So so I was thinking from the perspective of agencies, bearing in mind the topic title of Can Advertising Save the World, what are a couple of things that we need to do within agencies to have a positive impact? So I think one of the first things we need to do is redefine our definition of success. So I think the world is changing very quickly, and as an industry, I think we need to adapt to that change faster. Over the last 50 years, business success has been measured in profit, has been measured in financial terms, and our industry has been amazing at driving that success. But I think what we're seeing now is a shift from businesses to a definition of success that includes people and the planet. And so for agencies to be successful, I think we need to be making that shift alongside them and demonstrating to our clients that we can help them see the bigger picture and deliver success that takes into account their profit, people and planetary goals. And I think that broadening of what our responsibility is one of the big things that we need to get our heads around. The second thing that I think we need to do, and this is kind of, it should just be BAU for our industry, but the second thing we need to do is ensure that creativity is taken seriously and invested in. I think as more and more brands start to invest in sustainability, there are a couple of risks for brands. So one is if everybody's talking about sustainability in exactly the same way, does it become wallpaper? Do people turn off if we're a bit too worthy with it? We need to be thinking about interesting, exciting, creative execution to grab people's attention. And I think the second risk, and the thing, again, where agencies really need to help our clients, is how do you balance doing a category job, with the category being mass behaviour change to save the planet, alongside delivering individual brand value growth? Because if we don't deliver that second part, brands won't continue to invest in driving sustainable growth. And I think a lot of that balancing sits in creative execution and how we bring messages to life. yeah, that's kind of my provocation, like to today's session is we can make a positive difference, I believe, as an industry if we evolve our definition of success and therefore what we believe ourselves to be responsible for.
And just a quick question on that before we move on to Rob.
Yeah.
The definition of success, who defines it? Like, is that a responsibility of the client or is that something the agencies can push up the chain? Who would you say has that?
I think it's both. So I think clients are heading in that direction anyway. Like most of the big brands I work with and I see are setting themselves with big goals that cut across 3 pillars. But I also think as an agency or a strategist, we have a responsibility to say to our clients, if you want to drive growth and you want to find cultural relevance, which is 2 of the big jobs that you do as an agency, you have to be thinking about sustainability because it's important when it comes to growth and it's important when it comes to cultural relevance. So I think it's a both job. We're maybe coming at it from slightly different angles, but both of us should be talking about it to each other. And the conversation, I think, that comes out of that is where most of the value comes from.
All right, that's a great starting point, and I think feeds really nicely into our last speaker, Rob McFall. So Rob is one of the founders of the Purpose Disruptors, which is a very fantastic community of people that work in advertising and want to use their influence and their power as an ad man to do some good in the world. I strongly recommend that everyone join Purpose Disruptors. They have regular meetups. But he also is a Change the Brief advisor for Mindshare and is going to talk a little bit about his experience in crafting his role to make it more sustainable, as well as talk about some tangible actions that we can take right now to help save the planet.
Amy, thank you for that introduction. And Marcus and Helen, brilliant introductions and brilliant talks. Marcus, that idea of being good ancestors reminds me of that Bruce Springsteen song about, do you want to be a good ancestor? Do you want to be a ghost to your children? And Helen, yeah, this idea of redefining success, for our industry and redefining success in general in the business world, I think, yeah, is central to the work that's required. So I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring those 2 points in a moment. So yeah, as Amy says, I have a few roles, all dedicated to our industry responding meaningfully to the climate crisis. As Amy says, I'm co-founder of the Purpose Disruptors, and our vision is to reshape the industry to only promote attitudes, the lifestyles, the behaviours and the brands that are aligned with a net zero world by 2030. And as Amy said again, so I'm also working in Mindshare and working with Helen actually at Group M on helping that agency and the wider network in their sustainable transformation. And I share that my roles again, because what I feel is exciting at this moment is that these roles I have now exist in our industry, of placing sustainability at the heart of the work. And there's a recognition that we can and should direct our creativity to be in service of a zero carbon world. And of course, it's still early days. I sense many of us in this session are still doing this as a side job on top of our day jobs and starting a journey on how we bring this thinking into our work and into our agencies. But I want to share a prediction that in the near future, I believe all agencies will have chief climate officers to help with this big wave of transformation that's coming, just as digital and diversity before. And then it'll become instinctive for us. Embedding sustainable behaviours will be part of the job. Because I think we're in this liminal space between 2 worlds, an old world of extraction and infinite growth, and a new world of stewardship and regeneration. And if anyone's a surfer out there amongst you, I heard this wonderful story that maybe we're surfers about to ride. You can feel that you swell beneath the board and you're about to ride this wave and something's coming. And so I feel like it's an incredible time to be alive and to be in this industry, that we are fully aware that the way things have been need to change and need to change quickly. And that we are connected with this idea that as architects of desire, the meaning makers, we have the skills and we have the talent to make a difference. But it's not a given that this will happen, that our industry will take responsibility. So what's going to drive the transformation? Yeah, so on my learning journey in this work, I came across this quote that's guided my thinking on this ever since I heard it. A piece of ancient wisdom from the 13th century poet Rumi. He said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. So for me, that means we must learn to see the world anew. How does the industry and how do we all personally need to transform to be in service of a 1.5 degree world? What do we all have to unlearn? Ideas of growth, ideas of competition, ideas of hierarchy. How do we connect with our values and how do we bring them into our work? And how do we connect and learn from the natural world? Something which I think is core to how we apply sustainability meaningfully into the work. And some of you might be thinking sustainability, it's about its targets, it's the behavior change, it's the systems change, it's the brands, it's the new business models like circular economy, all super vital work that I'm also immersed in too. But then perhaps you're thinking, as I did once, do I also need to change the industry? And do I need to change as well how I think? But it's my understanding and experiences that change will come from within, from all of us. And we can bring that energy to the surface. So before I conclude, I just wanted to share a quick story on that to show that it's possible to do this. And it's something that happened to me, gosh, 5 years ago now. Back then, I wanted to understand if it was just me who was holding this question I was feeling and still feel now. You know, are we putting our talents and experiences to best use, given what we know about the world, about the scale and urgency of the climate crisis? And to be super clear, when I share this story, I'm super proud of doing good work, the craft and the teamwork that goes into campaigns, of the amazing, warm-hearted people in our industry, of working with great clients. But a long time ago now, I wanted to get the buy-in from my leadership to allow me some time in my day job to create some kind of purpose unit at the agency. So at the start of a pitch to them, I asked the leadership team if the last time they were at a dinner party, if everyone remembers what those were like, meeting a real person, and somebody asked what they did for a living, did they feel proud? And I was clear what I meant by pride. And if not, could they raise their hands? And it's just like a really tense moment asking your chief officers. I remember my heart was beating so fast. I thought the whole room could hear it. My colleague Rosie said her hands were shaking. You know, we both raised our hands and we waited. What would they do? That was the longest pause. This wasn't what they expected in the business pitch. It was something like, if anyone watches Dragon's Den, it was like if Dragon's Den has gone horribly wrong. But slowly the hands went up and then the adrenaline kicked in. We went into our pitch, we gave our case, and we got the go ahead to create Mindshare Purpose. But looking back, I think it was that dinner party question that was key to it all. For them, it was a day of back-to-back meetings on business and the future of media. But in that moment, I think we opened up briefly a space for everyone to reveal something more profound, like a yearning that we have to try and heal the world from where we stand, and the change we know we want to be part of. So to wrap up, I want to share this quote from this brilliant elder and ecologist, Joanna Macy, that we hold close at Purpose Disruptors. It's key to our work. So the quote, "The desire to take part in the healing of our world seems to be just below the surface, waiting for an opportunity and an outlet for expression. Whenever we bring the desire for the world's healing out into the open, whether for our own individual actions or through the groups we are part of, we help others to do this too. The power of example is contagious. This is how culture changes." Thanks.
Oh man, if we were in person, that would have got a massive round of applause. Instead, you've just got me. But that was such a fantastic speech, Rob, because it's just so wonderful to hear you talk about the human driver, you know, that inherent need in all of us to protect our planet. It makes it feel so much more real, and I love the idea that we're all sat and waiting, looking for an opportunity to step up, and just with a little bit of leadership and a little bit of guidance and a little bit of structure, which is what the Purpose Disruptors deliver, every single individual can do their part. So yeah, I'm pumped. We have a couple of questions now, and I want to stick with you, Rob, for the first one. We've across all three of these talks, we've heard this sort of dichotomy between, you know, extraction and infinite growth versus this sort of regenerative, net zero, alternative way of thinking. Advertising as an industry is inherently tied to growth, right? When Helen talks about success for our clients, a lot of that is about growing sales, growing market share, growth. So can advertising save the planet, or are we too opposed to the goals of the sustainability movement? Just a little question to start you off.
Can advertising save the planet? I think it goes back to sort of the core to what I was saying. Like, can we change? Can we transform? You know, to shift global society, all 9 million people need to live thriving lives, like in line with a 1.5 degree world. So the way things were no longer fit for purpose. Now that we know, once you know what you know about this climate science, you can choose to carry on as before and pretend that you can't change, or you can go through the work of transformation. Like, what can the industry be in service of the 1.5 degree world? How do we redirect our powers in driving consumption? And that's what the industry was born to do, to drive growth and consumption, to promote sustainable values and behaviors in the world, and to make that aspirational, to make that commonplace, and this idea that we hold as well. And how do you make living with less not feel like loss? And how do you sort of tap into the values that people have around community and connecting with each other? All these things that we felt during lockdown, amongst the tragedy of the last year and a half now of COVID, of course, there's also been moments where we've appreciated what life is about. And can we bring that to the surface and play a meaningful role in that?
And like you said before, this idea that we're architects of desire, to reframing what people desire, reframing the choices they make. That's a huge area of opportunity.
Yeah.
Helen, Marcus, did you have any thoughts? The event, the title of this event is "We Can Save the Planet." Do you agree?
I think we can have a positive impact. I think there are kind of 4 key areas of advertising impact. So we drive consumer choice and spending. So we have a duty to be responsible about what consumer choices and what spending we're driving. We educate and inform. We drive behaviour change. And I think, again, we have a responsibility to go, so how do we drive positive behaviour change? We amplify what's going on in society and cultural values. So again, which cultural values are we amplifying? And we also finance content creation. So again, what content creation are we driving? So I think, yes, we can have a positive impact. I think it goes beyond just helping people decide what to buy. And that comes to back to the point I made earlier around, we need to be able to take a bigger picture point of view and go, our impact doesn't just sit in driving consumer spending. That is an enormous part of what we do, but we also have all of these other ways in which we impact society and businesses, where we could be taking advantage of our skills and our creativity to drive change.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Helen, actually, and I think the biggest thing for me is the education piece, because there's so much confusion out there among people about the scale of the challenge, but also just what looks like, what does success look like? What is actually a company taking bold action? For those of us who geek out on this sort of thing, we know that they need to get to net zero as quickly as possible and draw down historic emissions, and we're just not seeing that. The Fortune 500, I think 163 of them have a net zero target, but the rest of them don't. The Fortune 500 employs 70 million people, responsible for 33 trillion of revenue. So there is something about actually us shaping narrative of, if a client comes to us and says, we want to be doing this, Volvo want to have full electric cars to be safe. It's not just about looking after your people who buy your cars by having safe cars, it's also about fighting climate change. And I think that's a good message. But what about their historic emissions? What about the billion tons of CO2 that have come out of cars? So it's sort of challenging and just saying, look, actually, if you want to stand out, then here are some of the bold things. Competitor analysis is something we should be doing as well, because what's bugging me a little bit, to be honest, is there's people coming out. There's a food brand I won't name and shame, but they're planting 400 trees a month. Well, let's put that in context. It costs 10 pence to plant a tree through Eden reforestation projects. That's 40 quid. There's a large insurer who's said they're planting 1 million trees, but they employ 50,000 people. One of our Million Tree pledges is a web design agency of 10 people. And I think actually, as advertisers, we have responsibility that when a lot of companies with the right sort of intention, it's not their fault that they don't have the knowledge yet to say, right, we're going to start planting trees. We want to say we're planting 100 trees a month, or we're going to get to net zero by 2040. There is perhaps, I don't know, because obviously I'm a PPC, SEO, spreadsheet, digital marketing guy. I don't know if there is room to push back and say, look, that just isn't bold enough. That's not going to stand out and be impressive to consumers who are, if they are getting more informed. They're watching the climate show on Sky News at 6:30 every night. They're understanding that actually there's a lot of work to be done. And as Rob says, they are yearning for change. So actually we can perhaps educate our clients a lot more and perhaps push back up the chain to be a lot more bold. I don't know what Helen and Rob think of that, but yeah, it sits to me as an important thing to do.
It reminds me a little bit of what, Helen, you mentioned earlier around the idea of how can brands talk about sustainability in a way that is still ownable and still creates something that is distinct and that is a point of differentiation. And I wanted to come back to that actually, just to dig down a little bit on, firstly, any brands that you have seen that you think are doing that well, and are really, to your point, Marcus, being bold, being authentic, having a real impact rather than greenwashing. But then secondly, as a sort of follow-up question, is it right to frame this conversation in a ownable brand narrative? Like, should someone own sustainability, or should it just be a baseline expectation? How do we feel about that?
Maybe can I jump in on that second point? Just sharing a point of view that just sort of forming on that. So I think there's two things I'd like to share on that. One, we don't have time for every brand and every organization to go off on their own individual sustainability journeys, because we just don't have the time. We have to halve emissions by 9 years. So on one level, there's this need and desire for like collective action and like working together on this. And another sort of area I'm exploring right now is just this idea of biomimicry, of learning from the natural world. Like, what can we learn from the natural world? Mother Earth's been around for billions of years. It's a perfectly designed system and thrives in that system. It knows when to stop growing. It thrives all the time. And you look at the natural world, you see competition, try to not turn that to a line, but you'll see that everything is in service of everything else. Everything is in service of life. So I feel like there's an opportunity then for brands to work with each other to like promote and make sustainability commonplace, and not make it feel like it's an ownable thing that's theirs. It's a thing for everyone. It's a thing for the entire category. And you see it in other industries. You see the fashion industry starting to come together. You see that and build an environment. Been doing that for a long time now. And yeah, of course, starting to seeing that surface in our industry as well right now, with lots of examples that are happening at the moment. Free purpose disruptors is one. But yeah, just those two ideas I wanted to put into the room.
I think I wasn't expecting biomimicry to come up today, but I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, of looking at the world and kind of how everything is connected. I think to the first part of the question around basically which brands are doing this well and managing to find that balance. I think there are quite a few brands out there who are doing really good work. So I think Tesco, a really good example. So if you look at the work they're doing as a business, operationally around food waste, they're making some great strides. They're working collaboratively with partners and employees and their customers to drive change in food waste. But when you look at some of their campaigns, they are undeniable from Tesco, and they are serving the broader Tesco purpose of serving British shoppers a little better every day. So their No Time for Waste campaign talked about food waste, but also talked about the benefits in terms of saving money for shoppers that come from thinking harder about food waste. So the connection of sustainability to value, which is totally core to them as a business, was really well done. I think IKEA are another brand who do great work. So again, they're changing their business operations. A lot of the work they do is around encouraging reuse and repair and recycling. So it's serving the bigger purpose of kind of moving towards a circular economy. But when you look at their creative executions, they are again undeniably IKEA creative executions. So if you think about their Fortune Favours the Food Ball campaign earlier this year, it's doing really good work that serves a bigger purpose, but it's doing it in a way that it's kind of going IKEA than doing this work in this area. So they're really good. And I think Selfridges are another example of a brand who's doing really good work that is very in line with who they are as a brand. So they're doing a lot of work around what does better buying behaviour look like in the fashion industry. And so they're partnering with rental brands, and they're doing these beautiful like luxury window displays from rental brands, and they're doing repair cafes and stuff in their store. So they're bringing secondhand shopping to life, but in a way that is very Selfridges. It's high-end, it's aspirational, it's luxury. But again, they're serving the bigger purpose of making essentially secondhand shopping, secondhand common style shopping, normal, and not just normal, aspirational. So I think there are quite a few brands out there who are managing to both to get a brand impact out of it, so they're able to go back to their board and go, this work is driving growth for our brand, but the changes they're driving are behavioural and scalable and serve a much bigger purpose than just a brand. So those are the kind of people I'm thinking about when I talk about that balance.
They're brilliant examples. And there's such a good spectrum as well. Tesco at the one hand talking about how sustainability is also more economical, perfectly in line with their brand, and then Selfridges making, going back to what Rob said, the architects of desire, creating a new space for secondhand and used clothing. Like, that's so in line with what they do, because they create what is aspirational. They create that sort of high-end fashion space. So yeah, brilliant examples. Marcus, did you have anything you wanted to add on that question before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, I'm not a branding man, but with, following on from Rob's point, we've got 9 years to sort this out. I guess the question is, are they doing enough? That's the thing. Like, are what they're doing, is they in line with science-based targets to keep us below 1.5? I'm still yet to hear anyone talking about drawing down lifetime emissions, and I think that's the other narrative I think we need to be telling people, is that, even if we stopped all CO2 or greenhouse gases today going in the atmosphere, we still need to draw down the 2 trillion tons we've put up there. And no one's talking about that yet. I feel that actually perhaps as advertisers, we can start pushing people to ask those questions. I'd love to hear if Volvo are doing a direct air capture or something in addition to having electric cars, because everyone's doing electric cars. So, but I don't know how we as creatives can push back and say that's just not strong enough. Is it in line with science-based targets? Is it there? And it ties in with Rob's point about if there is a chief sustainability officer, we can perhaps have those guidelines for clients as they come in and we take briefs. But again, I have to hold my hands up and say I'm a digital marketing man, so I don't know about that part of it really.
Well, what you do know inside out is this whole space of kind of everything from carbon capture and offsetting through to trees and going above and beyond. And I think there might be some people on the call, certainly myself when I joined the Sustainability Council a year ago, who find all these terms a bit confusing. And it might actually be helpful, Marcus, if you could just in layman's terms, like,
yes,
what is the difference between offset, drawdown? Like, what has tree planting got to do with all of them? How do they all fit together?
Yeah, I mean, really simply, I think, in the presentation, the reason I wanted slides just to make it really simple, there's 2 games in town, right? We need to stop putting CO2 in the atmosphere, and we need to draw down what we've put up there, right? It's a very simple, it sounds really boring, but it's a waste management issue. We've dumped all this gas up there and it's staying up there. And the ways to draw it down is obviously planting trees. That's one way of doing it, but it has to be planted in the right places. To give you guys another stat that's fascinating, we've lost half the trees. 3 trillion trees have been cut down or lost in the last 100 years. So we need to put them back. If you think about, we've fouled the nest, right? We've made an absolute mess of the planet. Quite frankly, we need to put things back. We need to stop dumping stuff up there. We need to put the trees back. We need to pull it. So, and then the terms around it, drawdown just means drawing down. I'd recommend Bill Gates's book. It puts this stuff in very sort of very clear numbers-based terms. If you're that kind of person, it's obviously written by an engineer. But I always try to simplify it with that thing of, look, we've made a mess. We just need to fix it and put it back to how it was, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Trees obviously absorb carbon dioxide. I think I mentioned in my talk, 1 million trees will draw down, 300,000 tons over 25 years. So, like, it's a very simple thing of cleaning up the mess. The question is, I guess, how we as advertisers can influence the people who are making most of the mess. Going back to the Fortune 500, that's 33 trillion of revenue that they're responsible for, 70 million employees in the most polluting countries. So there's conversations, I guess, if we are doing, the branding work for and the creative and the marketing work for these huge corporates, perhaps we can have a disproportionate impact up there. Does that answer a couple of the points you feel, Amy?
It does, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the idea of just stop any more going up and pull down what we've already done. That's a really good way of thinking about it. Yeah. So we've got just under 10 minutes left, and I did want to invite anyone from the audience to ask any questions that they might have. So if you have a question, please pop it in the chat now. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask you all a bit more of a personal question, right? So Rob, you've said, let's get wise and think about how we can change ourselves. How did you each shape your professional lives to have more, to be something you're proud of, right? To have more impact on sustainability and do something that mattered to the planet?
I'll go. I'm going to use the word journey. It's been a journey.
Talk about your journey.
It's been a really long journey. I think in order to bring more sustainability into your work, you have to be prepared to try quite a few different things to see what works for your individual organisation. Different stories work with different organisations. So Rob and I both work within one holding group, but we've taken quite different approaches to bringing sustainability into our day-to-day work, because we work in different companies with different cultures and different people. So I think trying different approaches work. The main thing that I've probably done is just bring it into conversation wherever I can. So if somebody's talking about how to engage employees, I'll talk about why sustainability might be a good thing there. Or if a client has a question around tapping into a different audience, I'll bring audience data that shows that audience is interested in sustainability, and just treating it as a normal part of conversation. Is I think the first step. I think conversation is the smallest unit of change, and over time those conversations open up new opportunities, and you find like-minded people, and you find extra doors open the more you talk about it. That might be a bit wishy-washy. I don't have 3 bullet points.
I would love to know, like, how long is this journey? I mean, how long have you been?
I've been talking about this flag. I reckon about 5 years. However, over the last 12 months, the pace of it has just unbelievably changed.
Really?
It's really sped up. Yeah, so I'd say I've been talking about it for about 5 years or so, and it felt slow at first. The last 12 months, there's been a step change in conversation around this, in businesses talking about it, in clients talking about it, in the industry stepping up and setting firm targets. So yeah, I think if you're just starting out now, you're in a great place, because I think there are a lot of doors that are open to you, and people looking for somebody to take responsibility for this kind of work, and kind of here's what our organisation can do about it. Yeah,
well, like Rob says, the Chief Sustainability Officer is on the horizon, so start shaping your career towards that goal. There's some really exciting opportunity there. Marcus, how did you start the Million Tree Pledge? What was that journey like for you?
So I've got an answer, but I want to sort of tell the longer journey and then the bit that gets to it, if that makes sense. So I started off going to University of East Anglia 15 years ago and getting worried about climate change. I mean, I studied philosophy, but I got worried about climate change when I met people who were studying ecology and saying, well, I'm not going to have children. I'm just so worried. And that just alarm bells were ringing. The people that were studying the science were terrified. And I got involved with the Green Party and started doing digital marketing for them back in the day. And that's how I actually got into digital marketing and set up an agency. But I kind of lost my way, to be honest, and sort of in sort of 2016, 2017, I was just focusing on business growth entirely. And I had a thing where one of our clients at the time was Lotus Cars. And I'd spent all morning doing the strategy session with them. And it's an American expression of, I left it all out on the field, right? So I used all my energy, and then I went off for lunch and I walked through the city centre of Norwich, and there was a school strike. And I just burst into tears because I realised that I was using all of my, as Rob talks about, all of my sort of, talents, or everything I've worked towards, all my creativity, to promote a sports car. And actually that just reminded me I need to come back home to what I really am passionate and worried about and scared. So that kind of led to sort of looking out for things. I joined ecology.com, which is where I started learning about the tree planting. And then how I actually came up with the Million Tree Pledge is I had as you know, Amy, a horrendous case of COVID last year. I've still got long COVID, unfortunately. But in bed, struggling to breathe, the thing that made me feel better was planting trees, funnily enough, for ecology. Just got thinking the planet's struggling to breathe. I'm struggling to breathe. I just need to do something to distract me. And then just learning about the scale of it, the 3 trillion trees, I thought, gosh, well, I'll set a goal to plant 1 million trees personally, at my own money by the time I'm 40. But, I can get I'm lucky, I own an agency of 50 people. I'm one of the founders, so I can go to the board and say, this is what we're doing. We're going to take the 1 million tree pledge as well. And it just dawned on me that there's probably other people that, would like to think of, want to be ambitious. I think joining ecology allows you to be climate positive. It's the Netflix subscription for the planet. But actually, there's this conversation I've engaged with you, with everyone at Beamer, of let's just go a bit beyond. Let's be bold. Let's cover all those people that perhaps can't afford to plant trees or don't feel that they can or aren't informed like we are. So that's where I am today, really. Just, long COVID and in bed, sort of just came up with the idea of the pledge, but inspired by school strikes and people taking amazing action.
It's such a personal journey, isn't it? It's such a, I mean, that sense of you started when you were so young with this passion. Like you were naturally, you went to it at uni and then lost your way and had to find your way back. Like there's a film in there. There's a film in you, Marcus. Rob, what about you? I mean, you've done a fantastic job of shaping an entirely new role within Mindshare and within the broader industry. Like, how has that been for you?
Yeah, I wanted to share a few things that come up to me as you ask that question. I think one of the first things that I feel is required is that this idea of resilience. As especially 5 years ago when you felt quite alone, I would say, when you're asking these questions, and that's not the case now. But I think there's still a need for resilience as you're pushing and driving change. And I think to get that resilience, you need to connect with like, why are you doing this? Like, why? Once you're aware that your work is potentially, doing the work that you do is part of the problem, how do you still stick within the industry and believe you can make it? You can be part of the change that we know is needed. And I love Marcus's idea. For me, it was about how do I be a good ancestor and not a ghost to my children, and that's been a sort of my touchstone, my driving force in all of this work. So the thing that I connect with that as I'm having those difficult conversations and bringing people on board. Because I guess the other thing that I think I'm conscious of as people are leaning into this more and wanting to push the change that is required, it's back to that IPCC report. We require deep transformational change at every level of society. It's how do you bring your industry on board with that? How do you bring your client on board with that? So that requires difficult conversations, and I think it takes courage. It takes courage to do that, and every person is in a unique place. Every person is. I can't see anyone in this call. It's really bizarre. You can't sense where people are from or where they're coming in from. So everyone has that first step to take. I'm wondering, can I share a poem? It's a poem I just sort of came to my head. It came to me. I saw it again a few days ago. I think it speaks exactly to this thing. Like, what can you do? Would it be okay to share that? A bit experimental, but I just follow it. I thought I'll do it. The poem is by David White. If anyone knows David White, and he said in his poem, "Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the third. Start with the first, the thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way of starting the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To find another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes a private ear, listening to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and be focused. Start close in. Don't mistake the other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Just want to share that. It was really relevant.
What a perfect way to end, Rob. I mean, whatever I say is just going to ruin that. I always feel like we should just hang up.
David Whitesmith, you know, fantastic poet. Look him up.
Yeah, that is. Put the poem in the follow-up email. Yeah, because that is a wonderful end, and perfectly summarizes what everyone has said. I was thinking as you guys were speaking, you're all so eloquent about this and so passionate about it. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to spend a little bit of time just learning from you and hearing your perspectives. And honestly, I mean, the amount of pithy quotes, we could start a t-shirt company, like what I've written down. Conversation is the smallest unit of change. Less is not loss. Be a good ancestor, not a ghost. Like, if it wasn't bad for the planet, I would start a t-shirt company with all your quotes. But probably that's moving in the wrong direction. So I will just end by saying thank you everyone who has joined us in the audience. I really hope that you've got something from this session. We'll do a follow-up email just with a recording of the event, as well as any kind of key little takeout pieces, and of course that beautiful poem. If you want to find out more about the work Good Loop is doing in sustainability, we've developed a green ad tag, which is the viewability tag for the planet, so you can carbon offset your ad campaigns in real time. So get in touch with us if you want to find out more about that, and all that's left to do is thank each and every one of our fabulous speakers. Helen, Rob, Marcus, genuinely I'm so thrilled that you've joined us, and I've learned something, and I really hope that you've enjoyed being on the panel today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Great being here. Thanks for inviting us. Thanks, everyone.